I'm giving you a list of things that I don't do in crochet. And that sort of a list is different for every person. What we do and what we don't do depends on so many things, and one of those is, of course, the country where you are, how you learn to crochet, and when. If you're like me, that you learned to crochet decades ago, long before social media and internet, you would have known far less about what was going on in the rest of the crochet world. So I'm listing 6 things, and wait with each one that I have exceptions, or at least one exception to what I say that I don't do. Where I mention something or show something, I will have links in the description for those. You are very likely to disagree with many of the things that I'm saying, but that's all right. No problem. Everybody has different ideas, and it's good to bring the different ideas forward so that people can make their own decisions about these things. The first thing is that I never use knots in my yarn. And this is something that comes very far in my life, because I learned to crochet before I went to school, and then we crocheted at school, and both my mother and the primary school teacher emphasized that you cannot have knots in your yarn because it makes a hard, unpleasant lump, and that's really stuck with me, and that's what I have always been doing. There are lots of different ways of doing knots, like the magic knot, or just the very basic way. You first knot one way and then the other way, and many others, but I don't use any of those. But there are exceptions, and the exception to this for me is yarn bombing. The works are outside, they are large, people don't notice, so I may use knots at times. But then you may think how to avoid it. The most common way, of course, is just to leave the yarn ends hanging and then weave them in afterwards with the needle, which is something I do a lot. There's this that's called Russian join. If you have a lot of time, go for that. It takes time, but it's very tidy. But there's a very similar one that I use, is this where you blend frayed ends. As well as this here where you twist yarns, which continues to be one of the most popular videos I have on my channel. The next one is that I don't use acrylic yarn. Acrylic is plastic, so especially nowadays with the plastic overload in the world, it's even more important. But I had never used it much. You do hear people saying that, especially when you start crochet, to use acrylic because it's cheap, and it can be cheap. But good quality acrylic isn't that cheap either. And if you go for very bad quality yarn, you won't enjoy crochet. You have no idea how nice it is when the yarn really feels lovely in your hands. So for that reason, I would never recommend anybody who starts crochet to use acrylic yarn. Of course, what you can get also varies from one country to another. I live in Finland, where natural fibers have always been the most important. But there are so many nice ones, both plant-based, like cotton, bamboo, linen mixes, and then animal-based, also all types of wools, alpacas. And if you have very little money to use for crocheting, I would rather go to thrift stores and any kind of second-hand stores, because they often sell yarn. You can get better quality yarns there. Now, yarn bombing would be one exception for me. The things are outside in the sun and rain and wind, so acrylic may last longer, plus you are not wearing it, which is one of the main points. Another exception is that I design for magazines, and sometimes they ask me to use acrylic. The next one has to do with a subject that is discussed a lot in various crochet groups. And it has to do with tension, swatches, gauge. And that's something I never forget to do, is to check my gauge before I start a project. For the simple reason that if you don't, what you end up with can be too big or too small. Again, an exception to this too, and that is that if the finished size of the item really doesn't matter, like in things like Christmas decorations, or often in scarves, the exact width, for instance, may not matter. Otherwise, I always do it. And I actually have this calculation thing, see the link. And also, when you start something, you have no pattern, you just want to do, say, a baby blanket or whatever, and you want to check the size beforehand, I have a calculation guide of how to do that. And how to do that is also something I learned as a little girl. I was already taught at school at the age of, I think, 11, how to do that. And I have used that ever since. The next one is something that obviously has nothing wrong at all. It's just not my thing. And that's amigurumi. I don't like most of them, and I certainly don't like the thought of making them. And that's simply that it's fiddly, it's small, you have pieces, and you have to put filling in. I don't like that even. And one reason also is that I love different kinds of stitch patterns, textured stitches, and lots of different stitches in one project. And in amigurumi, you mostly do it just with single crochet. So that's also one reason. But if I was to make one, I would want them to look super, super cute and really strong, bright colors. Like these here ones by my friend Veronica. She designs these and has patterns for them. And these I think are really so cute that I could be tempted trying one. The next one is that I would never start a ball of yarn from the outside. For the simple reason that it keeps jumping about no matter where you put it. And you have to take the band off it to be able to do that. So I always take it from the inside. An important tip, by the way, if you have these types of balls, always check which end has the bigger hole and take it from there. It goes easier. This short that I published has been quite popular, and I'm showing there how to wind yarn from a skein so that you get the yarn easily from the center. Again, an exception to this too. Some yarns are so sticky that you don't get them properly from the inside, so that would be the exception. That may be mohair or ones with sequins or long furs coming off it, novelty yarns. So those would be an exception. And the last thing today is that I don't use blunt tapestry needles. There's nothing wrong with them, it's just my preference to use only sharp ones. Just like the fact that I know that the needle will go through anything, I never have to force it. But this would be an exception to this point, very chunky yarn, or like in this here tapestry type crochet bag. It was easier to weave in with a blunt needle. I'm interested to know what you think of all these points, and I'm looking forward to conversation in the comments. And we are all different, so what matters here is that you find out what works for you. Often people haven't thought about the other possibilities, so it's good to bring up the fact that there are choices. Next, watch this here video. It gives you 6 different tips for how you can crochet faster. Till next time!